Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ashtasakis ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, just one. Okay. You can see the PowerPoint, right, Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji.
Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam He Krishna Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। So yesterday Padmalochani Mataji finished until the 3rd verse of Gita Mahatmya. So today we'll start with the 4th one. Can everyone see the verse?
Yes.
Please repeat after me. Gita Sugita Kartavya
Gita Sugita Kartavya
Himanyai Shastra Vistaraihi
Himanyai Shastra Vistaraihi
Ya Swayam Padmanabhasya
Ya Swayam Padmanabhasya
Mukha Padmad Vinishrita.
Mukha Padmad Vinishrita.
Would anyone like to recite?
Gita Sugita Kartavya
Gita Sugita Kartavya
Himanyai Shastra Vistaraihi
Himanyai
Shastra
Shastra
Vistare
Vistaraihi
Ya Swayam Padmanabhasya
Ya Sayam Padmanabhasya
Mukha Padmad Vinishrita
Mukha
Mukha Padmad
Padmad
Vinishrita
Vinishrita.
Gita Sugita Kartavya
Gita
Sugita
Sugita
Kartavya
Kartavya
Himanyai Shastra Vishtare
Himanyai
Himanyaya
Shastra
Shastra
Vistaraihi
Vistare
Ya Swayam Padmanabhasya
Ya
Ya
Swayam
Sayam Padmanabhasya
Padmanabhasya
Mukha Padmana Vinishritya
Mukha
Mukha
Padmad
Padmad Vinishrita
Vinishrita.
Gita Sugita Kartavya
Gita Sugita Kartavya
Kim Anaya Shastra Vistare
Himanyai
Himanyai
Shastra
Shastra Vistaraihi
Vistaraihi
Ya Swayam Padmashabhasya
Ya
Ya
Swayam
Swayam
Padmanabhasya
Padmanabhasya
Mukha Padmad Vinishrita.
Mukha
Mukha Padmad
Padmad
Vinishrita.
Vinishrita. Okay, thank you. So Gita Sugita Kartavya Kimanyai Shastra Vistarai Ya Swayam Padmanabhasya Mukha Padmad Vinishrita. So Kimanyai, why another? Shastra Vistaraihi, multitude of scriptures. When there is Ya Gita, that Bhagavad Gita, which is Vinishrita, uttered, Mukha Padmad, from that very lotus mouth, Swayam Padmanabhasya, of he who has a lotus navel, which is Krishna, and that Bhagavad Gita which is Sugita Kartavya, that which is to be recited and sung nicely. So Srila Prabhupada says, because Bhagavad Gita is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one need not read any other Vedic literature. One need only attentively and regularly hear and read Bhagavad Gita. In the present age, people are so absorbed in mundane activities that it is not possible for them to read all the Vedic literatures. But this is not necessary. This one book, Bhagavad Gita, will suffice, because it is the essence of all Vedic literatures, and especially because it is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada mentions 2 key points here. The first key point is that we cannot read all the existing Vedic literature. As we know, the Vedic literature is written in very complex Sanskrit, and it takes about 12 years just to learn the Sanskrit grammar, which includes the 4,000 sutras of Panini, and to also learn various philosophies like the Shat Darshana. So to learn those completely itself, it takes more than a decade. And then you have to get practice reading commentaries and reading those Vedic literatures, which is an even more difficult task. And in addition to being written in complex language, the Vedic literature is also very huge. And because we have short lives, we are less intelligent, and we are lazy, we will never be able to read and assimilate the Vedas. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, Chapter 1, Verse 10, it says, Prayen alpayusha sabhya kalavasmin yugejana manda sumanda mateo manda bhagya upadritaha. So, like I mentioned before, the verse explains how people in this age of Kali are lazy, they're misguided, they're less intelligent, and they're unfortunate. So it's almost impossible for us to read all these Vedic literatures, like Srila Prabhupada is saying. But on the other hand, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken in a situation where war was about to take place, so Krishna had to make everything very concise. All the Vedic literatures, all the Vedic wisdom, he had to make it very concise and give an effective summary to Arjuna in approximately 2 hours. So the Bhagavad Gita is only 700 verses as compared to the thousands of verses of the Vedic literature. Furthermore, the Bhagavad Gita was spoken in simpler Sanskrit than Vedic Sanskrit is, and to make it even more simpler for us, Srila Prabhupada clarified its meaning even further through his purports, and he left no room for us to be misguided, like the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam said, Sumandamati. He left no room for us to be misguided because he made his purports very clear. So, Srila Prabhupada explains the what, why, and how for the Bhagavad Gita in that little section we just read. So what should we read? We should read the Bhagavad Gita. Why should we read it? Because it's the most effective summary of all the Vedic wisdom, and because we can't read the rest of the Vedic literatures, we should read the Bhagavad Gita. Not just a whole summary of the Vedic literatures, but it also has even more than the Vedic literatures. So, while it's less in quantity than other scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita does not compromise on the quality of the information. The Bhagavad Gita is actually complete, and by following the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, we can go back to Godhead. In the first verse of Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada summarizes this point quite eloquently. He says, one will find in the Bhagavad Gita all that is contained in other scriptures, but the reader will also find things which are not to be found elsewhere. That is the specific standard of the Gita. So, we know the standard of the Gita. So Prabhupada tells us how we should read it in this section right here. He says we should read it attentively and regularly. So attentively means that we have to be attentive to understanding the message of the Bhagavad Gita. A common misconception in India is that ritualistic hearing and recitation of the verses of Bhagavad Gita without understanding their meaning is sufficient. Nowadays, scholars are studying the role of sacred sound in religion and how practitioners relate with God through sound. So this last semester, I was studying how Srila Prabhupada conceptualizes the Krishna consciousness movement's followers' relation with sound and how they should use it to connect with Krishna. So one way to use sacred sound to connect with God is by reciting scriptures. Each verse of the scriptures is considered to be sacred sound. It's not material sound, but spiritual sound. And that's the reason why many Hindus just recite the Bhagavad Gita and they invoke the Lord's presence through that. So when I looked into Srila Prabhupada's approach to sacred sound, he did recognize that simply hearing and reciting the verses of Bhagavad Gita purifies a person because they're not ordinary sounds. But that's not enough for Srila Prabhupada. He asks that we not only hear and recite sacred verses of the Bhagavad Gita, but we also understand and then implement the messages that they convey to become fully purified. In other words, we may get some purification, we may become pious just by hearing the sounds of the Bhagavad Gita. But in order to become fully purified, in order to go back to Godhead, we need to understand what the Bhagavad Gita is saying, and we need to implement that in our lives. So that's how to be attentive. And then Srila Prabhupada also says we have to study and hear the Bhagavad Gita regularly. So regularly means every day. In our movement, in the ISKCON movement, Srila Prabhupada ensured regularity by establishing daily Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita classes in every ISKCON temple. So in the evening, devotees are supposed to study Bhagavad Gita, and in the morning, they're supposed to study Srimad Bhagavatam. So here Prabhupada said that simply reading the Bhagavad Gita is sufficient. That's correct, because the most fundamental basics of devotional service and the ultimate goal of a devotee are all contained in the Bhagavad Gita. In that way, it's complete. But the Srimad Bhagavatam is also very helpful in our devotional service because it explains to us in more detail how to surrender to Krishna. So Krishna's last instruction in the Bhagavad Gita was Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishyami Ma Shucha. So he tells Arjuna and the reader of the Bhagavad Gita, surrender unto me. And that's the essence of Krishna consciousness. But the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us more detail, it gives us examples on how to surrender to Krishna. So even to derive the full benefit from studying Srimad Bhagavatam, regularity is essential. We recite a few verses every day before we start reading Bhagavatam, and one of them is Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, by regular attendance to the Srimad Bhagavatam classes, inauspiciousness will be destroyed almost completely, Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu, and devotional service will be established as an irrevocable fact, Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So in addition to hearing attentively and regularly, Srila Prabhupada discussed earlier in the introduction that hearing submissively is also essential. So when he was discussing the spirit of the Bhagavad Gita, he explained how we need to have the same spirit as Arjuna. We need to be humble and we need to be a devotee of the Lord. We need to be bhaktas. And when we are bhaktas and when we're humble, then we can understand the secret. The Bhagavad Gita is a secret. It's a mystery. Rahasyam hetaduttamam. So only when we're devotees, when we're submissive devotees, and we hear attentively and regularly, then we can derive full benefit from studying the Bhagavad Gita. So we'll move on to the next verse of the Gita Mahatmya. Bharatamrita sarvasvam Vishnu Vaktra Vinisritam Gita Gangodakam Pitva Punarjanma Vidyate. So Gita Gangodakam Pitva, after drinking the Ganges water of the Bhagavad Gita, which is Bharatamrita Sarvasvam, the nectar of the entirety of the Mahabharata, and which was Vinisritam, spoken, Vishnu Vaktra, from the mouth of Vishnu. Punarjanma, another birth, navidyate, one does not know. So once we drink this Ganges water of the Bhagavad Gita properly, then we won't have to take another birth. So Srila Prabhupada says, one who drinks the water of the Ganges attains salvation. So what to speak of one who drinks the nectar of Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is the essential nectar of the Mahabharata, and it is spoken by Lord Krishna himself, the original Vishnu. Bhagavad Gita comes from the mouth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Ganges is said to emanate from the lotus feet of the Lord. Of course, there's no difference between the mouth and the feet of the Supreme Lord, but from an impartial study, we can appreciate that Bhagavad Gita is even more important than the water of the Ganges. So, in both the previous verse and in this verse, Bhagavad Gita's emanation directly from the mouth of Krishna is emphasized. So there it was Mukha Padmat Vinisritam, here it's Vishnu Vaktrat. So we often think of prasada as only foodstuffs that Krishna tastes and then gives back to us. However, the Bhagavad Gita is also prasada because prasada means mercy. And this mercy emanated from Krishna's lotus mouth, and Krishna gave us this knowledge so that we can return back to him in Goloka Vrindavan. So we have to drink this prasada not with our tongue, like we do with other prasada, but with our ears. So though both of these things are prasada, it's probably obvious that we're more eager to eat one kind of prasada than the other kind. So as we progress in devotional service, we would be as eager to drink the Bhagavad Gita through our ears as we are to eat anything else, any other prasadam with our tongue. So this metaphor of drinking spiritual knowledge is a common one. Even in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, chapter 1, text 3, it says, Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam shukamukad amrita drava samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavukaha. So, pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam. That means that Srimad Bhagavatam is compared to a mango in this verse, whose juice is even more relishable because Shukadev Goswami, Shuka means a parrot, because Shukadev Goswami bit into that mango. So when parrots bite into a certain fruit, that's a sign that the fruit is sweet. I don't know if the fruit becomes sweet after the parrot bites into it, or the parrot bites into it because the fruit is sweet. But the point is that the parrot's biting into it is a sign that that fruit is sweet. So Srimad Bhagavatam is described as the mango whose juice is even more relishable because of Shukadev Goswami's tasting that mango. And the second key point in this verse is that the Bhagavad Gita is more important than the water of the Ganges. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, verse 15, it says, Yatpada samshraya sutta munaya prashamayana sadya punantyupasprishta svardunyapo nusevaya. So the translation is, O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. So the Ganges, they purify us externally, but the Bhagavad Gita purifies us internally as well. It teaches us how to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and it helps us transform our lifestyles permanently. Even in the Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada quotes a question that Parikshit Maharaj asks about atonement. And he says, what's the use of atonement when people can't control their senses? It's like an elephant taking a bath and throwing dust all over its body. And Prabhupada gives the example of Christians going to church on Saturdays and they confess their sins, but then from the next day they commit sins again. So there's no internal transformation in them. Throughout his books, Prabhupada also refers to pilgrimages where people bathe in rivers like the Ganges or Yamuna as a ritual. In the same way, he says that bathing purifies their sins, but it doesn't take away their inclination to sin. So they come back after the pilgrimage and they continue to sin and they continue to accumulate bad karma, which they have to suffer. But when we read the Bhagavad Gita and when we implement the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't relieve us of sin temporarily but permanently. Because once we transform our lives, we'll lose that inclination to sin and we'll be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. So the next verse deals with another metaphor, and I just wanted to share something that I realized after my first semester at school. I was studying a theologian called Sally McFaig, and basically what she did throughout her career was that she came up with metaphors to enhance or revise our understanding of Christianity. So some of those metaphors that she came up with are the world as God's body, God as a lover, and God as a friend. So in Christianity, I could see that there was a need for scholars to come up with novel metaphors to help religious practitioners operate effectively in this world. However, in our Krishna consciousness tradition, in the Vedic tradition more broadly, we find many pre-existing rich metaphors that can aid our understanding and practice of devotional service. So actually what Sally McFaig came up with is already present in our tradition. So she said that we should conceptualize the world as God's body, and we find descriptions of this in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and the 1st and 6th chapters of the 2nd canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the description of the Virat Rupa and how all the planets and everything in creation is actually a part of the body of the Virat Rupa. And similarly, she came up with God as a lover. But we already have this. God as a lover is the topmost rasa we have, Madhurya rasa, that we can exchange with the Lord in our tradition. That's the topmost rasa. And God as friend is Sakya rasa. And not only do we have what other scholars are coming up with, we also have much more. For example, we have several other rasas, like Dasya rasa, Shanta rasa, and Vatsalya rasa, through which you can conceptualize a living entity's relationship with the Lord. And besides these 5 primary rasas, Rupa Goswami also explains 7 other secondary rasas in the Nectar of Devotion. For example, Virya rasa. This was the rasa that Bhishma Dev was in. So one of those beautiful metaphors is in the next verse that we have. It involves a cow, calf, milk, a milkman, and drinkers of milk in relation to the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, maybe everyone can repeat after me for this verse. Sarvopanishado gavo
Sarvopanishado gavo
Dogdha Gopalanandanaha
Dugdha Gopalanandanaha
Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta
Partha Vatsha Sudhir Bhokta
Dugdham Gitamritam Mahat.
Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat.
Would anyone like to recite?
Sarvopanishado gavo dogda gopalanandana Partho vasta sudhir bhokta dugdam gitamratam mahat.
Sarvopanishado gavo
Sarvopanishado
Gavo
Gavo
Dogda Gopalanandanaha
Dugdha
Dugdha Gopalanandanaha
Gopalanandanaha
Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta
Partha
Partho
Vatsha
Vatsa
Sudhir
Sudhir
Bhokta
Bhokta
Dugdam Gitamratam Mahat
Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat
Gitamritam Mahat.
Sarvopanishad Gavo
Sarvopanishado
Sarvopanishado
Gavo
Gavo
Dugdha Gopalanandana
Dugda
Dugda
Gopalanandana
Gopalanandanaha
Partha Vatsha Sudhir Bhokta
Partho
Partho
Vatsa
Vatsa
Sudhir
Sudhir
Bhokta
Bhokta
Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat
Dugdham
Dugdam Gitamritam
Gitamritam
Mahat
Mahat.
Sarvopanishado gavo
Sarvopanishado
Sarvopanishado
Gavo
Gavo
Dogda Gopalanandana
Dugdha
Dugda Gopalanandanaha
Gopalanandanaha
Partavasa Sudhir Bhokta
Partha
Partho
Vatsha
Vatsa
Sudhir
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 Bhokta
Bhokta
Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat
Dugdam
Dugdham
Gitamritam
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 Mahat
Mahat
Sarvopanishado gavo
Sarvopanishado
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 Gavo
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 Dugda Gopalanandana
Dugdha
Gopalanandana
Gopalanandana
Parto Vasudevbhokta
Bharto Vasudevbhokta
Dugdam Gitamritam Mahat
Dugdham
Dugdam
Gitamritam
Gitamritam
Mahat.
Mahat.
Okay, thank you. So Srila Prabhupada said, this is the translation that he gives. This Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, is the essence of all the Upanishads. It is this Gita Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, the essence of all the Upanishads, is just like a cow, and Lord Krishna, who is famous as a cowherd boy, is milking this cow. Arjuna is just like a calf, and the learned scholars and pure devotees are to drink the nectarian milk of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so we have the cow, which is Bhagavad Gita. The calf is Arjuna. Krishna is the cowherd boy. And the learned scholars and pure devotees are drinkers of the cow, which is drinkers of the cow's milk, which is the Bhagavad Gita. So from the Vedas, we learn that we have 7 mothers. Can anyone tell me who the 7 mothers are?
Cow.
Yes, Mataji.
So the skin cells, some other.
Nurse,
Guru.
Yes. Yes.
Queen.
Guru's wife.
Own mother,
Yeah.
Mother Earth, wife,
Yes, Mother Earth. The wife of a Brahmana.
Guru's wife,
Mm-hmm.
King's wife,
Yeah, the king's wife.
King's
That's all, I think. So yeah, the cow, our own mother, the real mother, the wife of a Brahmana, the wife of a king, the nurse, Mother Earth, and the wife of a guru. So the cow is one of our mothers, and here Bhagavad Gita is compared to a cow. So the cow is a special kind of mother, even more special than one's own real birth mother. Why? Can anyone guess why a cow is more special?
Because we drink the mother cow's milk for the whole lifetime.
Yes, Mataji. So when a baby is born to a mother, the mother automatically produces milk, but that milk only nourishes her particular baby and helps him or her grow. But when a calf is born to a cow, the cow also produces milk, but that milk is not only available just to her calf, but to all of humanity. So through the milk of cows, we all are nourished. Similarly, the milk, which is the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita, is applicable and beneficial to all of us, even though the Bhagavad Gita came about because of Arjuna's particular situation. Arjuna is the calf. So just like when a calf is born to the cow, then the milk comes out. So because Arjuna was the calf, the milk from the Bhagavad Gita came out. But we can all drink that milk. It's not just for Arjuna because the Bhagavad Gita is compared to a cow. The questions that Arjuna asked are questions that we all have sometime in our lives. And the answers that Krishna provides are answers that we all need. So I was reading the testimonials on the back of the Bhagavad Gita, the actual physical version. On Veda base, I don't think they have the testimonials. But you can see how very prominent personalities and well-known personalities find guidance in the Gita, in those testimonials. So we can see how the milk of the Bhagavad Gita transcends the limitations of any group or civilization. All people, not just Arjuna, can elevate themselves spiritually by reading the Bhagavad Gita, by drinking the milk of the Bhagavad Gita through our ears. So besides the Bhagavad Gita transcending any groups or civilizations, it also transcends any borders of time. So this milk never goes bad like normal milk. It always remains fresh and relevant. So it's kind of like the Akshay Patra, maybe, like Draupadi had. the food never goes bad, so this milk never goes bad. So its messages remain relevant even today. Even though it was spoken 5,000 years ago, its messages remain relevant even today. So, for example, I wanted to read Emerson's testimony on the back of the Bhagavad Gita. He says, "I owed a magnificent day to the Bhagavad Gita. It was the first of books. It was as if an empire spoke to us, nothing small or unworthy, but large, serene, consistent, the voice of an old intelligence, which in another age and climate had pondered and thus disposed of the same questions which exercise us." So the same worries that we have today, the same problems that we have today, Krishna gave answers to 5,000 years ago when Arjuna asked those questions. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5, Text 11, Narada Muni explains to Vyasadeva when Vyasadeva is despondent, he doesn't feel satisfied. Even if he wrote so many Vedic literatures, he doesn't feel satisfied. So his spiritual master, Narada Muni, comes to him to help him figure the problem out and to see why he's still dissatisfied. So at that time, Narada Muni says, Tadvag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishlokam abadhyavatyapi namanyanantasya yashonkitani shrinvanti gayanti grinanti sadhavaha. So Narada Muni says, quote, "That literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc., of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation, full of transcendental words directed toward bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by pure men who are thoroughly honest." So the key words that we should look at here are that the Srimad Bhagavatam, literatures that describe the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, and pastimes of the Lord, brings about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. So even though this literature was composed such a long time ago, it brings about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. So it addresses our current issues, our present issues, and it brings about a revolution so that we can improve our lives, so that we can direct our lives towards Krishna, so that we won't be misguided or misdirected anymore. So Srila Prabhupada often uses this word called hackneyed to describe how the words and timeless teachings of the Vedic scriptures are always timeless and that they never get old. So hackneyed means lacking significance through having been overused, unoriginal, and trite. So we read the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam every single day. Even great devotees, even sannyasis, even though they know so much of the scriptures, they always read every single day. Even Gandhi said in his testimonial that those who meditate on the Gita will derive fresh joy and new meanings from it every day. So it never becomes hackneyed, like Prabhupada says. It never becomes overused. So here are some quotes about hearing about Krishna and the word hackneyed that Prabhupada wrote. So the first one is, "For one who is wrapped in hearing and chanting about Krishna, the subject matter never becomes hackneyed or old." And the second one is, "The sound of the spiritual world is nectarian and eternal, whereas the sound of the material world is hackneyed and subject to an end." So the words that Krishna spoke are sounds from the spiritual world. They're spiritual sounds because Krishna never becomes material. He's always spiritual. Even if he comes to the material world, he's not touched by the material energy. He's not under the control of the modes of material nature. So even for Arjuna himself, after he got the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita at Kurukshetra, after he fought the battle, after they talked to Bhishma Dev, after Yudhishthira ruled for some time, he went to visit Krishna in Dwaraka. And at that time, he found that Krishna was no longer on the planet. So he became overcome with a lot of grief and a lot of sadness. And he wasn't able to protect the wives of Krishna. And so a group of cowherd boys, which was actually Krishna, came and kidnapped those wives, the 16,108 wives of Krishna. And as a Kshatriya, Arjuna's duty was to protect them. And he tried to protect them, but it didn't work because actually the cowherd boys were Krishna. He didn't know that, but he was feeling really bad, first of all, that Krishna left this planet because he was a very close friend of Krishna. And second of all, because he couldn't do his duty as a Kshatriya to protect Krishna's wives. So when he finally comes back to Yudhishthira, the Kali Yuga started, and there were signs of the Kali Yuga, like there were rains the rains were untimely, people were quarreling with each other. I think Yudhishthira also says the deities were crying in the temples. I'm not exactly sure, but I think I remember that he said that. And so when finally, after all these signs manifest and Arjuna comes to Yudhishthira, Yudhishthira asks a long series of questions that why are you so despondent? And finally he asks, did you lose your friend Krishna? And at that time Arjuna gets really emotional, he gets really overwhelmed, and he says, yes, I lost my friend. And all these years, all these days, everything I did, it was only by the mercy of Krishna. And we used to sleep on the same bed, we used to eat together. He was so merciful to me. Even though he was God, he tolerated all the seeming insults that I put towards him because I didn't know he was God, and I used to just treat him like my peer. And he was feeling so much sorrow, and there were tears coming from his eyes. But then he says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, verse 27, he says, now I'm attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead Govinda, because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. So these instructions that Arjuna is referring to are the Bhagavad Gita, the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita. And he's also saying that these transcend time or space. These were given to Arjuna when he was confused and depressed about killing his relatives. But now his confusion and depression is about something else. It's about Krishna leaving the planet. But still he's finding solace, and it's relieving his burning heart when he remembers those instructions. So not only do they transcend time, they also transcend space. Even though they were spoken at Kurukshetra, they'll have the same effect anywhere else. We can read Bhagavad Gita in any corner of the globe. And by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, and through his English translations and the subsequent translations into, I believe, 76 other languages, it is possible for people to read the Bhagavad Gita in any corner of the world at any space. So while we discussed the wonderful glories of the milk, the Bhagavad Gita, we can't forget the milkman. So Krishna is the best milkman. Unless we have our own personal farm, which most of us, I think, we don't have direct access to the milk from the cow's udder. So the milkman is the one who milks the cow, and then he delivers the milk to us. So in India especially, it's a common greed-based practice that the milkman puts a lot of water in the milk and dilutes the milk so he can get more money by selling the milk to more customers. Whereas if the milk is in its original thick consistency, he can only sell it to a few customers. So he puts a lot of water in the milk. So that's if the milkman is greedy. But if the milkman is a good milkman, he'll deliver us pure milk in its thick form. So we're fortunate to have Krishna, the best milkman, and his most prominent and supreme identity is the cowherd son of Nanda Maharaj. So cows are very dear to Krishna, and he's very good at taking care of them and milking them. When we worship Krishna every day as we offer a bhoga, we recite the mantra Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagad Hitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. So Go Brahmana Hita. Krishna is the friend and benefactor of the cows and the brahmanas. We can see Krishna's love towards the cows on multiple occasions, especially Govardhan Puja. In the Krishna book it says how Krishna wanted to engage, he wanted to utilize Nanda Maharaj's wealth in worshipping the cows and Govardhan. Even the name Govardhan is related to the cows. So everything in Vrindavan is related to the cows and Krishna really loves the cows a lot. So that's why we have several names for him related to the cows, like Gopala and Govinda. So Krishna is often lovingly called as Gopala, which means the protector of the cows, and Govinda means one who gives pleasure to the cows and to the senses. So because Krishna is the best milkman, he gave Arjuna the milk of the cow of the Bhagavad Gita in its purest form. And due to the mercy of the Parampara and of Srila Prabhupada, most importantly, we have that same milk that Krishna gave to Arjuna in its purest form. Because through the Parampara, it was protected. And that milk, it transcends any groups among human beings, it transcends time, it transcends space, and it remembers forever fresh. So all we have to do is we have to drink that milk attentively, regularly, and submissively. So that's all I have for today. Thank you all very much. Any corrections or comments?
Excellent class, Sugopi Radha Devidasi.
Thank you, Mataji.
All I can say is sadhu, sadhu. I remember reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam that when the audience was very pleased with the speaker, they just said sadhu, sadhu. It's like saying excellent, excellent. You had all the elements of a great class, and you supported it with relevant quotes from the scriptures. You explained it so thoroughly, and you gave pertinent examples, and it was just so graceful. For me, I enjoyed it very much. I really liked this, hearing about your experience of reading the Christian, this lady, the book that she wrote about.
Yes, Mataji.
Because they need more, they need more. And that was really interesting. Thank you. I enjoyed
Thank you, Mataji.
Yeah,
Please,
I really like the metaphors, the metaphors that you used, they were really excellent. And so the comparative analysis of the Christian theology and the Vedic theology, that was really nice. I like that a lot.
Thank you, Mataji. I like this metaphor of the cow and the milk.
It's very significant for our tradition.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Mataji. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna. I liked how you used the term of Krishna is a milkman.
Mm-hmm.
That was a nice term that you used.
Thank you, Chaitanya. Actually, that was in the translation. Dogtha Gopalanandana. So Dogtha means the milkman. But yeah, it's an interesting comparison that they made with Krishna. You have anything else to add?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Sugopi, Radha Mataji. Very beautiful class you have given. Very pleasing to hear. It's like connected to our ear.
Please bless me.
You have to bless me.
No. Lucy, what do you have to say? Do you want to add anything?
No. I've read Hare Krishna.
Okay. Anyone else?
Tulsi will probably say, is Tulsi important or cow important?
She's saying very nice class to Mataji.
Very nice class.
Krishna needs Tulsi on top of milk.
I was also thinking that another quality of a mother is selflessness, and how even if the child ignores the mother for many years or many days, there's no question of revenge in the equation. So the mother is always ready to offer her love. Similarly, there may be books of Bhagavad Gita in people's homes for years and years, and they may not worship the Bhagavad Gita, or they may not open the Bhagavad Gita, they may ignore it, but since the Bhagavad Gita is like a cow, it's like our mother, when they do open it, they obtain all the wisdom they need to come back to Krishna through Srila Prabhupada's purports and through Krishna's words. That's one more thing I was thinking about.
Nice. She's always ready to give milk. Yeah. Lovely. Mhm. Nice meditation.
Yes. Mataji, we have 8 more minutes.
Hare Krishna. Besides the explanation of the metaphors, which I found very interesting, I'm not very good at understanding philosophy. So with my material eyes, I really like the choice of the fonts in the slides. They were very relevant and very made the slides very exciting as well.
Thank you, Prabhu. So tomorrow is Gita Jayanti, so we can drink the nectar of Bhagavad Gita, I guess. And hopefully it says that even if you drink it once, you won't have to take another birth again. If you drink the Ganges water of the Gita. Of course, drinking it properly is the challenge, but hopefully I'll be able to do that by all of your blessings eventually. Okay. So if no one has anything else, I'll stop here. Prabhu, should I read this?
No, Mataji. Just everyone can read. Just I'm putting, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, Krishna.
Okay, thank you to everyone. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha
Thank you, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Vaishnava
Krishna.
ki jai.
Thank you.
Sugopi ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Yes. Prabhupada ki jai. Gita Jayanti ki jai.
Jai.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you.